Hello everyone, I'm Brian. Today I'm writing to the difference between sentient beings and inert objects. Consciousness pure versus reflected. So this is interesting. Consciousness pure versus reflected. That doesn't really make too much sense. Because consciousness is, and that's it. Right? There's no such thing as pure consciousness or reflected consciousness because there is only consciousness. And the difference between sentient being and inert objects, well, that's the difference. Just taking, of course, at face value, that, well, sentient being is sentient being and inert object is inert object, but they're both consciousness. So I thought this was pretty interesting. I figured this might maybe answer some questions of mine. Like, I mean, not necessarily questions, but help better understand things. I don't know how to put it, but let's go ahead and give this video a shot.
Samit C. from Toronto asks, I just listened to your talk on witness consciousness. You refer to the podium as an object of which we are aware. The podium also has the same consciousness, Brahman. How is it that the podium is not aware that it is a podium, unlike us humans, who as the witness consciousness are aware of our body and mind?
I would assume for this one would be, it's the consciousness is always aware, no matter what it is. But the object itself, whether it can remember or not, that's a different story. That has nothing to do with consciousness necessarily. I guess, but it is consciousness itself. So while the table and us humans are both consciousness, because of the function of us versus a chair, we have memory, we can remember, whereas a chair doesn't have memory. It's, in a sense, an inert object that doesn't, it's not meant to, well, chair, yeah. It used to be wood, which was technically alive. But it's the function of the object itself. So, animals do have some form of memory, I believe, because they remember, certain places and certain things. It's just their memory's not as great as ours, I don't believe. And we have a very great sense of memory. I think we probably have one of the greatest, probably. I don't know. And that alone is the reason why we remember, and that is what gives us, I guess, technically our ego to some degree. Because animals, do animals have ego? I don't think so, because I think they're instinctual mostly. They, know to play and, eat when they're hungry, sleep, reproduce, etc. Where, because we have memory, we can do a little bit more.
Does it then mean that the mind with all its sensory inputs is the seat of awareness? Since the non-sentient podium does not possess a mind, wouldn't then this be the most plausible argument that mind is needed for awareness and witness consciousness cannot be aware without the mind?
Just the other way around. The straight answer to this is the mind needs awareness. Awareness does not need a mind. Proof, we tried to prove it in that little experiment which we did at that practice. Conceive of shutting down the senses, shutting down the mind. If you shut down the senses and shut down the mind, you can't hear, smell, see, taste, touch. You can't think, remember, desire, hate, enjoy, suffer. And yet, one must admit that it's entirely possible that I'm still there. It seems quite clear to me that I am still there without these capacities. And when these capacities kick back in, it's not that I come into existence. I remember in this philosophy of mind class at Harvard University, we were reading Descartes, and I think, therefore I am, Cogito ergo sum. So I asked this question, immediate question from a Mandukya Karika perspective. So in deep sleep, Descartes goes to sleep, he doesn't think. So does he disappear? Does Descartes pop into existence every time he wakes up? A new Descartes is created every day, early in the morning when he wakes up. And worse, if he dozes off in the middle of a philosophy class and he wakes up, is it a new Descartes? A Buddhist would be happy with this. Vijnanavada, Kshanika Vijnanavada, momentary consciousness.
Well, I would say for that one, it's the fact that the mind is never really off. I mean, the mind is always doing something, but I guess the think part is, I guess, the specific where I think, therefore I am, as opposed to your brain being active. So if you stop thinking, therefore you are not. maybe it's a bit going a little bit, too literal with the quote. Because of course there are a lot of quotes that you can take it literally and then you can take it metaphorically. I think it's more along the lines of I think therefore I am is the fact that it's because I'm able to think and therefore I exist. Because if you're not able to think at all, then kind of like the inert objects, they cannot think, therefore they are not alive. Animals can think a little bit. They're instinctual mostly, but they still do think. They like, oh crap, danger, and then run away. Or it's like, food? Let me go towards it. But yeah, they still think, so therefore they exist. I don't think it's necessarily once you stop thinking, then all of a sudden you just disappear, or you're a whole new being.
But from this perspective, modern Western philosophy of mind, there's no answer to this question except the fact, of course, Descartes didn't mean it as simply as that.
Okay, there it goes.
What he was referring to, David Chalmers also says this.
Oh.
What Descartes was referring to is actually consciousness. He's not saying that we are entirely dependent on thought. He's pointing towards consciousness. Now, what accounts for the difference between me and the podium, this microphone and this table and all? In Vedanta, it's a very simple structure. Your consciousness, and there is a subtle body called which includes mind, intellect, and all of that. And then there is a physical body. Now, in order to manifest this consciousness, you need a subtle body. Just like I have a face, but in order to manifest this face, I need a mirror, so that I can see this my own face in the mirror. Or another example, which we used to do as little kids in school in India, it's always bright and sunny, not like this. Most of the time it's very bright and sunny. So, ray of sunlight, and we would use our steel tiffin boxes to flash that sunlight onto the eyes of other people. So, there's sunlight everywhere. But that polished surface, it collects the light and makes it into a beam of light which you can flash the light on somebody or direct it into a dark room. It lights up. The mind in Vedanta or Sankhya works very much like that. You are limitless awareness. But in order to know something, you need the instruments of knowledge, which is mind and the senses. So consciousness reflected in the mind and illumining the mind and the sensory system, now you can see and hear and smell, now you can think and perceive.
It's really weird to say reflected in the mind, though. Consciousness is reflected, as though the mind and the consciousness are two separate things. That's very strange. But I kind of understand, perhaps it's a use in a way to understand how how we are what we are, how we are the way we are as well.
Now, how does that explain the difference between me and the podium? In Vedanta, this is how you explain the difference between a living being and a non-living being. Do you remember in school, at least we had in school, give 5 points of difference between the living and the non-living. You have to make a table. Well, in Vedanta, it would say that the presence of the subtle body or absence of the subtle body. So these are physical things. This is a physical body, living. This is not a physical body. And this is a physical body, but non-living. Non-living. What makes the difference? Both are physical entities, but in this physical body and in all living beings, there is the subtle body. In fact, one of the components of the subtle body is pranamaya kosha. Prana means vitality or life. If you say living in Vedanta or Sankhya, it simply means you're talking about the pranamaya kosha. Pranamaya kosha is part of the subtle body. That means a subtle body is present. The moment a subtle body is present, mind, intellect, all of those are also present. They're all part of the subtle body. They're all equipment. They're all machinery. Very subtle, very powerful machinery. Not physical machinery like this. They are present. If they are present, this limitless consciousness becomes concentrated or reflected in that. And now you feel, I think, I hear, I smell. This I and the feeling of consciousness here is not pure consciousness. It's the reflected consciousness. It's like you are reflected. My face is reflected in the mirror, and then now the mirror lights up and says, I.
I would love, if I was there, I would love to ask him, can you explain this in such a way where everything, I don't know, maybe it's oversimplified if you just say, well, explain a way that everything is consciousness, because you're saying reflective consciousness when the only thing is consciousness. So why are you introducing this duality of terms? But again, I remember in the very beginning, a lot of people have said that sometimes you need duality to explain certain things. Because just saying everything's consciousness, some people have difficulty grasping that. Well, I wish he would explain it in duality and non-duality form, and I'm just wondering, maybe it's a little bit boring, or maybe just too easy to answer it in such a way of non-duality, and saying that everything is consciousness. There's nothing that's different from it, and therefore what else is there to explain after that? And I think that's kind of the issue with trying to explain non-duality, is that it kind of oversimplifies a lot of things and still probably doesn't quite answer the questions for people, and perhaps going this duality form and then from duality going to non-duality, which again a lot of people said in the very beginning, it kind of helps transition them to that. I think also Swami here has said that sometimes you have to start non-duality to get to duality to get to non-duality.
Well, not I. I am here. You are a mirror. And you are entirely dependent on this one. If now the mirror were to say, so without the mirror we can't see the face. Therefore we assume that the mirror is where the face lives. No. The face depends on the mirror. No. The mirror is not where the face lives. The face is here. The mirror is there. The face depends on the mirror. No. The reflected face depends on the mirror. The real face has nothing to do with the mirror. And the mirror depends on the real face to get a reflection. Similarly, the mind, we think the question is, it's very logical. I mean, it's very inevitable, but it has to be cleared up. Our feeling is, so ultimately, the consciousness by itself doesn't do anything. It's a pretty useless thing. It's the mind which does everything. Therefore, the mind is important. No, the mind cannot do anything at all without consciousness. You are consciousness itself. You are not the mind, you are not even the reflected consciousness. Just as I am here, I am not the mirror, not even the reflected face in the mirror. Because of my presence, the mirror and the reflected face, the mind and the reflected consciousness go out and do many things, and they are given the name of sentient being. So again, another confusion can arise. So I and the sentient being are different? No. The sentient being is nothing other than you. Right now what you are is the real face, the mirror, and the reflected face together. Only in Advaita Vedanta, the mirror and the reflected face are also appearances in consciousness. That mirror face example will break down in Advaita Vedanta. This is an analytic.
Sorry, I'll rewind that, but there you go. I guess him trying to explain in terms of non-duality, it's just the examples kind of break down, which is kind of the problem. And something everyone has said too, and which I've said as well, that the dream is the one good one that that seems to work even in the examples, because the dream and the dreamer are both one and the same. Everything in the dream is you. There's no question about that. There's no separation. Like, well, the trees are a bit different than you. So no, that's your dream. That's you. That's really weird to say. It's you. But anyways, everything in the dream is essentially your. I don't even know what a dream is. Memories in a lot of sense. But anyways, you are everything in the dream, including yourself.
Analytic example, which separates, and just for the purpose of understanding Advaita Vedanta.
Mm-hmm.
This is an analytic example, which separates, and just for the purpose of understanding. Okay. So, a straight answer to the question: what's the difference between living beings and, let's say, a person and the podium? Because of the presence of the subtle body, this person, this consciousness there, is now has all these activities, all these powers, because of the presence of the subtle body. And the podium has just a physical existence, doesn't have a subtle body, doesn't have a causal body, and so consciousness is there. Limitless consciousness is there, but it is not expressed as anything else except one thing. You know what that is? We keep saying consciousness, consciousness, but let's not forget, in Vedanta it is existence, consciousness, bliss. So it is manifested there in the podium. Atman is manifested as what? As existence. Notice, it exists. You say, no, but that existence belongs to the podium. No. If you smash the podium, you will have wooden splinters. They exist. If you smash the wooden splinters into wood powder, it exists. Well, suppose you destroy all the wood. Well, the carpet exists. I'm translating from Shankara's commentary in the second chapter, 16th verse of the Bhagavad Gita. If you smash all pots in existence, then where is existence? Shankara says the cloth exists. If you smash, then the next thing will be if every existing thing is destroyed in the universe. Now we have stamped out consciousness, let's stamp out existence. Let every existing thing in the universe be destroyed. Where is your precious existence? Shankara says it's still there, it's not manifest anymore. Like that. It's just like you are pure consciousness. Without senses, without the mind, without the intellect, you're still there. But you're no longer thinking, remembering, hating, seeing, hearing. None of that is possible. But when the senses come, last question here would be, but in that case, the consciousness is dependent on the senses and the mind. No, it's the other way around. The mind and the senses are dependent on consciousness. Consciousness for what? For the light which illumines them. Not only that, for existence. It's like when somebody says, it's in the jewels, ornaments, the necklace and the bracelet, they are the really valuable thing. Gold does nothing by itself. That's silly. The necklace and the bracelet and the ring and all the golden ornaments, they are nothing but gold. They depend entirely on gold. And in fact, it's much better to say it's gold which does everything. Like whatever you use, you can have for a necklace or a bracelet or a ring. It's actually the glory of gold itself. It's the glory of consciousness itself which manifests as mind and body and universe. Not the other way around. I'm talking about your glory.
Okay, I want to get back to one thing he said over awareness, but in order to know something, you need the instruments of.
But in order to know something, you need the instruments of knowledge, which is mind and the senses.
In order to know something, you need the knowledge which is mind and the senses, okay?
So consciousness reflected in the mind and illumining the mind and the sensory system, now you can see and hear and smell, now you can think and perceive. Now, how does that explain the difference between me and the instruments of knowledge, which is mind, it lights up. The mind in Vedanta or Sankhya works very much like that. You are limitless awareness. But
there's something else he said. There's something ever about that. Yeah, that's. Hold on, I'll be right back. Let me try to find it. Okay, so I literally just turned right to it as soon as the next click I did. Okay, the moment the subtle body is present, mind, intellect, and all those are present. I believe this is what I was looking for.
Is part of the subtle body. That means a subtle body is present. The moment, if you say living in Vedanta or Sankhya, it simply means you're talking about the Pranamaya Kosha. Pranamaya Kosha is part of the subtle body. That means a subtle body is present. The moment a subtle body is present, mind, intellect, all of those are also present. They're all part of the subtle body. They're all equipment. They're all machinery. Very subtle.
Okay. The moment the subtle body is present, mind, intellect, and all of those are present. I believe pranamoka. Oh my gosh, I want to say that correctly, but anyways. So, are plants? Do plants have subtle bodies? I don't believe plants have minds at all. I don't think so anyway. I'm not a biologist. Plantologist. Dealing with plants. I'm not one of those. So I don't know. I don't think plants really have mind. They're just at best just again instinctual to a degree. It could be like a hive mind, maybe like single cell organism hive mind, meaning that they're just reactionary based. So when which if you ever watch a plant and there's like sunlight in a particular part, the plant will like I've seen it fast forward like it goes in a circle, but whenever it detects sunlight on the right side, it kind of twirls that way, and it'll try to latch onto something so that it can get as much sunlight as possible. So it's not like it's thinking it's like, oh, there's the sunlight, let me go that way. No, it's just like, well, let me try to figure. It just it's blind and just going like, oh, I sense something over here. So do plants have subtle bodies? It would then require to have a mind and intellect. But is I guess let me go back to what I said earlier. No. Difference between a living being and a non-living being. In Vedanta, it would say that presence of a subtle body or absence of a subtle body. Oh, here we go. Maybe.
In Vedanta, this is how you explain the difference between a living being and a non-living being. Do you remember in school, at least we had in school, give 5 points of difference between the living and the non-living. You have to make a table.
Okay, so plants, I do believe, have a living body. It consumes like we do. Don't know if it sleeps. There's some say it has some form of communication, perhaps. It wants to survive. It can die. It's born and it dies.
Well, in Vedanta, it would say that the presence of the subtle body or absence of the subtle body. So these are physical things. This is a physical body, living. This is not a physical body. And this is a physical body, but non-living. Non-living. What makes the difference? Both are physical entities, but in this physical body and in all living beings, there is the subtle body. In fact, one of the components of the subtle body is pranamaya kosha. Prana means vitality or life. If you say living in Vedanta or Sankhya, it simply means you're talking about the pranamaya kosha. Pranamaya kosha is part of the subtle body. That means a subtle body is present. The moment a subtle body is present, mind, intellect, all of those are also present.
Okay, so there. I don't know. Again, genuine question. Like, does anyone know? Something means that you're talking about the pranamaya kosha. Pranamaya kosha. I said it right. I love how that's such a weird, smooth word to say in my mind. I don't know why. Subtle body, pranamaya kosha. Subtle body. Both physical entities, but in a physical body and all living beings, there is the subtle body. And the subtle body has the mind and intellect. I wonder if intellect doesn't necessarily mean, well, the mind. That's kind of a tough one. I say intellect. I know Sadhguru talks about how our cells has intellect. Intellect just meaning it essentially, like our DNA, it has a certain program. So no matter what, our DNA is going to do what it needs to do. That's the intellect part of it. It's I guess hard coded into our DNA to whatever DNA is supposed to do. It's supposed to grow hair in my my arm, or my nails will grow. The length of my finger or the length of my arm, or how many hairs I have on top of my head, or whether I'm going to go bald or not. All those are pre-intellectual programming on the DNA. Intellect, as Sadhguru will use, and I'm assuming perhaps Swami here is using it in that same sense, that intellect is just something that's just DNA, things that are going to happen without any kind of input. Like nature has an intellect. That the plant, like how things happen in nature, erosion from streams, the Grand Canyon carved out by just millions of years of water running through it, carving those deep grooves, how the forest is growing, and how maybe some plants have learned to adapt from the trees trying to cover the sunlight and killing every plant in the bottom except for one plant that probably wraps around a tree and goes to the top. It's kind of. I remember seeing that in that one nature video. It's like, dang, even trees are trying to kill plants. Well, because they're blocking out the sun, and plants that need sunlight, if they're too small and they can't get any, they're gonna die. That's where mushrooms exist, I guess. They eat the dead. Anyways, so there's the question: do plants have the subtle body, the mind, the intellect? I can give that, but the mind, though, that's a bit different. That is something kind of manifested from brain. There's the brain is the physical aspect of it, and the mind is not the entirety of the brain, but the mind is this idea of thought. So your brain does a whole bunch of automated things. When you're sleeping, you're breathing still. It's not like you have to be conscious. The Maya term of conscious. You don't have to be actively breathing. Your body will breathe for you while you're sleeping. Your body will regenerate cells without you having to regenerate. You know, you don't have to do that to regenerate the cells in your body, so it will do that automatically. You don't have to think like, consume the food. You know, you don't have to think about doing things. A lot of the part of your body is automated. When you're awake, you have to actively breathe. You have to blink. You have to look. You have to, you know, do active things, I guess. But anyways, again, does the plant have a mind? I guess that's yes, a mind. Does the plant have a mind? Let me know. Anyway, that's my reaction to the difference between sentient beings and inert objects. If you like my content, please consider subscribing, thumbs up the sound down below. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next vid.